Hello again. We spoke last time about using the chord of C major to demonstrate different styles, so not harmony, in other words, just rhythmic elements, louds and softs, staccatos, slurring, pedaling, what we know sort of generally as articulation. I'm going to put that to the test now and try a little exercise which will be to take you 200 years musically in 3 different stages in 30 seconds, just again using that chord of C major. So see how you get on with 3 different, hopefully distinct styles, and see if you can pinpoint them down. Remember that I'm not doing anything fancy harmonically here, I'm just playing the simplest chord possible. So there we are, 3 different moods, and I'm sure you can hear that what I was aiming at there was a kind of 18th century Mozart, Haydn classical sort of sentiment. The second, Rachmaninoff, kind of 19th century, big, loud, evocative, romantic music. And lastly, kind of end of the 19th century or early 20th century, kind of ragtime, Scott Joplin. So let's look at those a little bit more closely and see what is it that makes those 3 styles really distinctive, and hopefully you were with me on those and travelled through that 200-year sort of time frame. But let's start off with the sort of classical Mozart Haydn thing. So what's happening there? Let's split it into right hand and left hand. And in our left hand, we've got this little pattern going on. Now that's well known to music students, but maybe not to everybody watching this. This is a thing called an Alberti bass. And what's actually happening here is we're taking the chord of C major and splitting it and playing this little pattern so you only hear one note of it at a time. But it flows past you so fast that your ear is fooled into hearing that C major harmony, even if you don't blur the notes together in the pedal. So it's called the Alberti bass. It was invented by somebody called Domenico Alberti, and because, unlike me, he didn't have the good sense to marry a copyright lawyer, he was ripped off by the entire classical establishment, and that little pattern was used everywhere, and it's very distinctive. And that's what gives it the sort of Mozart Haydn music, that kind of very light texture, because you're only hearing one note, effectively, at any one time in the left hand. And they describe Mozart as that sort of light music, don't they? The music that, you know, you play to your unborn child to make them more intelligent, or the music they play on the runway to calm you down, to calm your nerves down. And that's one of the reasons it's kind of so light and flowing, is you've got this one note going on, and just very simple, what we call diatonic, which is just to say using the notes of the white scale, the scale of C major, for the tunes and melodies. So you put the 2 together and you get. So that's the basics of what's happening in that style. We may come back to these later on to add a little bit more about the articulation, the dynamics, the slurring, and maybe even a few little extra colour notes will move outside our C major palette. But for now, that's enough to be going on with. Then we moved on to 19th century Rachmaninoff, sort of big romantic. Okay, what are the major differences between those 2 clips? Well, first of all, I'm using the pedal much more, so you're getting these big palettes of lots of notes at once. So you're hearing a big welter of C major sound. And also, instead of playing the simple melody of Mozart, I'm just fleshing it out by playing a chord of C major on every note. So it's louder, and you're hearing more notes at once, so more notes on the ear, and it's far more slurred and sort of all blurred together because of this use of piano. So again, for the Mozart, and for the same thing in Rachmaninoff, essentially exactly the same music, but instantly you'll perceive it as a very different style. And then lastly, we move to our ragtime Scott Joplin. again, very distinct style. You hear it crop up many times in sort of television underscores, and it sort of instantly puts you in that period. So what is it about that? As soon as you hear it, you think, that's Joplin, that's ragtime, that's that kind of era. Well, you might have to bear with me on some very simple maths here, because we're going to talk about syncopation, because that's the word that people always use with this. It sounds jazzy, it sounds syncopated. Now, what exactly do we mean by that? Now, if I'm to take a little pattern of C major like this, that doesn't sound particularly like Scott Joplin. So what am I adding to that to make it sound syncopated and jazzy and ragtime? Well, I'll tell you, if you imagine we're in a time signature of 4 with a pulse like this, and I'm playing this pattern, so you can count the notes up and hear that I'm playing 8 notes to the bar, and you can number those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So in terms of 1, 2, 3, 4, the strong beats will be 1, 3, 5, and 7, and the weak beats will be 2, 4, 6, and 8. So you can hear the 4 with a little even number beats in between. Now, syncopation can be described very simply as putting a stress on a weak beat. So you're not expecting to hear it in terms of a 4/4 pulse. The weak beat is accented, and that's what makes it sound syncopated. And the way I'm achieving this, if you listen to that pattern again, you might notice there's a little repeated note at the top. Now, all I'm doing to achieve syncopation is tying those 2 notes together. So turning those 2 repeated notes into one slightly longer note. So it sounds like this. Now that puts in your ear a little stress on that note that's numbered number 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. It's not an accent, I'm not playing it louder, but the fact that we're stopping on it makes it stick out in the pattern, and you hear it a little bit more, you assert a little bit more importance to it. Now if you repeat that pattern round and round, it sounds like this. So again, nothing too complicated harmonically, but all I'm doing is syncopating by putting a little accent on a weak beat, which gives us that ragtime feel. So then we look at our left hand, and we're just... And you can just say, okay, you're playing 1 and 5 in your left hand, and just chords of C on the other beats. But there's a few more things to talk about there, aren't there? It's the single notes are pedalled, the chords are staccato, so you get this as opposed to, and the dynamic is sort of a mezzo piano, mezzo forte. So those little details that would pass you by, you wouldn't even consider them, are very important in nailing a style down. Put the whole thing together. So there we are, 3 styles using just C major in 30 seconds of playing.